Tyler Morgan had it all figured out. He ruled room 212 the moment he walked in. Phones out, laughter echoing, his classmates egging him on as he mocked the new teacher, Miss Harper Stone. He teased her accent, taunted her stance, shoved her shoulder forward. He thought it was harmless. He didn't see her jaw tighten. He didn't hear her whisper, "Enough." 15 seconds later, Tyler hit the floor, his arm twisted in a hold no bully saw coming. Phones dropped. Laughter died. The entire class froze. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did she just... But what no one knew was that Harper Stone wasn't just a former substitute. She was a former amateur MMA black belt with years of training. And Tyler, he was about to learn a lesson far beyond detention. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I remember the silence more than anything else. After Tyler hit the floor, after the gasps, after the chairs scraped back and the phones froze mid-recording, there was this stillness, like time held its breath. I'd never seen a classroom like that go from pure chaos to absolute quiet so fast. And in the middle of it all, Miss Olivia Lane stood there, calm, still, breathing steady like she'd done this before, not panicked, not proud, just present. She didn't gloat. She didn't even speak. She just looked at Tyler for a moment, then turned her back to the class and calmly picked up the attendance sheet that had fallen to the floor. Now I know what you're thinking. Who was she? Where did she come from? And what in the world was she doing teaching at Southwood High, a school where most teachers barely made it past mid-semester before quitting? Let me tell you something. Southwood wasn't just another underfunded school. It was a storm, a place where broken systems met broken homes, where kids came in angry, tired, hungry, and left even more so. The hallways carried stories, fights, arrests, even a teacher once having a panic attack mid-class. And yet here came Miss Lane. No experience in teaching, no social media, barely any records. Just a certification and a name. Olivia Lane. I didn't trust her at first. None of us did. She didn't flinch when Brandon slammed his locker shut right behind her. She didn't blink when Kyle made those off-colored jokes he used to get away with. She just watched, like she was waiting. But for what, we didn't know. I figured she was like the rest, here for the paycheck or stuck in some program she couldn't back out of. But what none of us knew was that she had chosen Southwood. Out of every school, she asked to be placed here. And that fight, the one where Tyler thought he had the upper hand, that wasn't even the full story. The video that leaked only showed 5 seconds. Him rushing her sidestepping, him hitting the ground. But what happened after? That's what nobody talks about. The part where she walked him to the nurse's office herself. The part where she filled out the incident report but didn't press charges. The part where she told the principal that this wasn't an attack, it was a response. That word stuck with me. Response. Like she'd been preparing for that moment. Like she knew one day someone was going to push her too far. Weeks later, I started piecing things together. I stayed late one day to make up for an overdue assignment, and I saw her sitting in her car in the parking lot, engine off, hands gripping the wheel, eyes closed, like she was trying to hold something in, something deep. That's when I started to see her not just as a teacher, but as a person, a woman carrying something heavy. And then I asked the question nobody else had asked. Why here? Why us? The answer didn't come right away. It came in pieces. In how she looked at the hallway murals of past students all faded and chipped. In the way she picked up trash from the gym floor after everyone else left. In the way she paused every time a siren passed the school. Like it reminded her of something she wasn't ready to face. I did some digging. The school file on her. 2 pages. No work history before education certification. No emergency contact. No clubs. No photos. Nothing personal. Just a note that she'd completed self-defense training. That's it. But one line caught my eye. In her application, where it asked for a personal statement, she wrote, "I'm here to protect more than just the curriculum." I didn't understand what that meant then, but I do now. See, what people didn't know, what nobody ever asked, was what came before Miss Lane ever walked through Southwood's doors. They didn't know about the brother she lost in a fight outside his high school. They didn't know she sat through his trial, watching the kid who killed him walk free on a technicality. They didn't know she spent 5 years after that training, learning how to fight, not because she wanted to hurt someone, but because she swore she'd never freeze again, never let another kid fall through the cracks if she could help it. And now she was here, at a school nobody wanted to teach at, with kids everyone gave up on, with boys like Tyler who were hurting in ways they didn't know how to say, who only knew how to mock or push or fight, and she stood in the middle of it, not as a hero, not as a savior, but as someone who knew pain and refused to let it win. But that wasn't the end of it, because what happened after that day, the day Tyler fell and silence filled the room, that's where the real story began. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. I didn't know her story at first. None of us did. The way Miss Lane carried herself, it was like she built a wall around her spirit and dared the world to try and knock it down. You could feel it even if you couldn't name it. She didn't walk into that school like someone looking for a job. She walked in like someone with unfinished business, like someone who had already buried something or someone and was walking through life on borrowed strength. That kind of energy. You don't fake that. You earn it. You survive for it. And the truth is, once I started paying attention, I realized she didn't come to Southwood to teach equations. She came to fight a different kind of battle. She was in her mid-30s, but there was something ageless about her. Not youthful, not old, just worn in all the right places, like someone who'd lived 100 lifetimes in silence. Her voice was calm, but her eyes stayed sharp, always scanning the room, always calculating who was hurting, who was hiding, and who might lash out first. I used to think she was cold, but I was wrong. She wasn't cold, she was focused. Because when you've survived what she had, you don't waste energy on things that don't matter anymore. From what I found out later, Olivia Lane grew up in a neighborhood not too far from Southwood. Different zip code, same struggle. Her mother worked nights. Her father, in and out of jail until he finally stopped coming home altogether. She had one sibling, a brother named Marcus. He was older by 3 years, quieter than her, but he was her protector. They shared everything, even trauma. When food was low, he let her eat first. When the lights got cut off, he kept her laughing in the dark. And when she got jumped walking home in the 6th grade, Marcus was the one who ran outside barefoot and took a bat to the boys that hurt her. That was her first taste of what it meant to feel safe. Real safe. Like someone had your back even when the whole world didn't. But that kind of safety doesn't last forever. Marcus got pulled into a life he didn't choose. Wrong corner. Wrong crew. Wrong night. And at just 17, he bled out in the back of a dollar store after trying to stop a robbery he had nothing to do with. The boy who tried to save everybody couldn't save himself. Olivia never forgot that. Not the sirens, not the blood, not the silence in her mother's eyes after they got the call. That's the thing about grief. It don't ever really leave you. It just changes form. And for Olivia, that grief hardened into something else. She stopped talking, stopped trusting, and she started fighting. Literally. She found a local gym that offered free classes to at-risk girls. At first, she joined to keep from breaking down. But somewhere in the middle of the sweat and bruises, she found a new way to stand. Combat sports gave her what life kept trying to take away: control. It wasn't about violence for her. It never was. It was about reclaiming her body, her voice, her boundaries. When she stepped into that ring, she wasn't the girl whose brother got murdered in front of a corner store. She was the one who stood her ground, who set the terms, who knew how to read people by the way they shifted their feet or clenched their fists. And she got good. Real good. Word spread. Olivia, The calm Storm Lane. She didn't fight angry. She fought smart, silent, surgical. And most times, she won before the first punch even landed. That's how you know someone dangerous, not by how loud they are, but how still they can be right before everything changes. But then, she stopped. Right at the height of it all, just disappeared. No press release, no injury report, no announcement. She left the sport behind like it was a memory she didn't want anymore. That's when she got her teaching certification, took night classes, volunteered at youth centers. Most folks thought she gave up fighting because she was done. But truth is, she just found a new battlefield. See, Olivia didn't come to Southwood by mistake. She requested it. She asked for the school with the worst records, the highest teacher turnover, the most suspensions. She wanted the noise, the brokenness, the chaos, not because she liked pain, but because she understood it. She knew what it was like to be the kid no one believed in, to act out just to feel seen. She knew that behind every threat was a cry, behind every slap of a locker, a shattered home. And she figured if she could survive hell, she could help somebody else find their way out. But what hit me most, what really got under my skin, was the way she moved through that school. Like every hallway was sacred, every desk a second chance. She never raised her voice, never demanded respect. She earned it with silence, with presence, with patience. She'd stand at the front of that class while chaos raged and just wait. Wait until the kids settled. Wait until they got tired of trying her. Wait until someone, anyone, gave her an inch. And once they did, she built a whole mile of trust from it. I remember one day a kid from another class threw a desk at the wall and stormed out. Olivia didn't chase him. She walked to the door, picked up the broken leg of the desk, and said nothing. She just placed it gently on her own desk. No lecture, no punishment. And somehow, that silence said more than words ever could. But even in all that strength, you could tell she carried something heavy. There were moments where her eyes drifted mid-lesson, where her voice dropped half a tone, like a memory was pressing down on her. And when she thought nobody was watching, she'd trace the scar just under her wrist, a faint, jagged line that didn't belong to any training accident. That was a memory too, one that never healed right. That scar, it told me everything I needed to know. Olivia Lane wasn't just a teacher. She was a survivor. Of violence, of grief, of silence. And every morning she walked into that building, she brought all of it with her. Not to scare us, but to show us what it looked like to stand tall anyway. But Southwood don't make it easy. And neither do the kids. They come to class with fists already clenched and eyes that don't trust. Tyler Monroe was one of those kids. Loud, smart, angry in ways even he didn't understand. He wore that anger like a badge. And Olivia, she saw right through it. That's what made him hate her. She didn't flinch, she didn't bite. She just waited. And when he finally tried her, when he crossed that line in front of everybody, that's when she reminded us all. Respect ain't given. It's demanded by presence. But what came after that moment? After Tyler hit the floor and the videos stopped rolling? That's the part they don't show. That's the part nobody posted online. And that's the part where everything changed, for her, for him, and for all of us watching. I still remember how the day felt before it ever even went wrong. The air in that classroom was thick, heavier than usual, like everybody was waiting on something to pop off, but no one knew exactly when. You could hear the rustling of backpacks, the scraping of chairs being dragged where they didn't belong, and that sharp echo of someone tapping their pencil too fast on the metal desk leg. That's the sound that always got to me. Those little repetitive noises. They made the silence feel dangerous, like thunder building behind closed doors. Miss Lane had walked in that morning just like she always did. Calm, clean, crisp. Her gray blazer barely wrinkled, not a hair out of place. Not a single bead of sweat on her forehead despite how hot that room always got. It didn't matter that the AC had been broken since September, or that the blinds were half missing. She moved like she was untouchable. But you could see it in her eyes that she wasn't at peace, not really. She scanned the room with that quiet awareness, like she was looking for who would test her next, and my gut told me she already knew the answer. Tyler Monroe was posted up in the back, arms spread like he owned the place. One AirPod in, hoodie halfway over his head even though it was against the dress code. And that smirk, man, that smirk could curdle milk. The kind of grin that told you he was about to pull something, just waiting for the right moment. Brandon and Kyle sat to his left and right like flanks, laughing at every word Tyler said even if it wasn't funny. That trio, they fed off each other's chaos. They didn't need a reason, they just needed an audience. Miss Lane started the lesson like nothing was off, wrote the objective on the board in that precise, clean print of hers. But Tyler, he was already unraveling her piece. First, it was the whispers, loud enough to be heard but quiet enough to claim innocence. Then came the fake coughs, the exaggerated sighs, the accidental pencil drops. You know the type. Every move a dare, every sound a challenge. I sat 2 rows from the front, and even from there I could feel the heat rising behind me. It's wild how disrespect travels, like static. It don't need a direct line, just tension in the room. At one point, Tyler balled up a piece of paper and launched it at the whiteboard. It bounced off, hit the floor near Miss Lane's feet. She paused, looked down, then back up. But she didn't break, didn't flinch. She bent down slow, picked up the paper, smoothed it out, and dropped it in the trash. That's when I saw Tyler's smile shift. It was subtle, but I caught it. That moment where someone realizes they don't have the power they thought they did. Then came Brandon. He stood up pretending he needed to sharpen his pencil, but his feet took him in the opposite direction, straight toward Miss Lane's desk. He kept walking, laughing to himself, chest puffed, like he was just too cool for consequences. Everyone else stayed seated, eyes darting back and forth, half excited, half scared. The thing about a classroom like that is you learn how to watch without being seen. Most of us didn't want to be next, so we stayed still, silent, just waiting to see how far Brandon would go. And then, he lunged. Not in a full sprint, not a real attack, just a fast shove. One of those quick, playful bumps that bullies use when they want to act like they weren't trying to start a fight. But Olivia Lane, she moved like she saw it coming 3 seconds before it ever happened. She stepped sideways, caught his wrist with one hand, redirected his momentum like she'd done it 100 times before, and Brandon went flying sideways into the side of the desk with a loud crash. Not hurt bad, just stunned and humiliated. The room froze. For half a second, nobody breathed. Then Tyler stood up. He didn't say a word, just pulled his hood down, flexed his arms, and stormed forward like he was going to be the hero of the day. This was his stage, and he wasn't about to let someone else take the spotlight. Miss Lane didn't back up. She didn't raise her voice. She waited. Let him come close enough to reach out, then used his own weight against him. She gripped his jacket, spun low, and flipped him clean over her hip. The thud he made when he hit the floor wasn't loud, but it echoed. It echoed in my chest, in my gut, in every wall of that room. Kyle stood up, phone in hand, trying to record. But Miss Lane, she moved faster than I knew a human could. She didn't hit him, didn't even touch him, just stepped forward close enough that he panicked, tripped over a chair leg, and went down before he could even press record. I don't even think she blinked. And then, silence. No screaming, no yelling, just stunned breath. You could hear the birds chirping outside through the cracked window, like they didn't even know they were in the middle of a war zone. I sat there frozen, heart pounding so loud I was afraid people could hear it. Miss Lane looked around the room, slowly, one student at a time. Her face was calm, not angry, not smug, just tired, like a woman who had fought too many fights and was praying this would be the last one. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. But that wasn't the part that made the headlines. No. What came next? That's what none of us were ready for. And truth is, no camera ever caught it. Not even Kyle's. Because after all that, after everything they tried to do to her. She walked over to Tyler, looked down at him, and offered him her hand. That's when the room broke. Not from noise, but from something deeper. Something in us cracked. See, it wasn't the throw. It wasn't the power. It was the grace. She helped him up like he hadn't just tried to take her down, like he was still worth helping. And that shook us more than anything. But what nobody ever saw was what happened after she left the classroom. When the administration got involved, when the district called, when the media twisted the footage, that's when the real storm started. And that's the part I need you to hear next, because what came after, it didn't just test Olivia Lane, it tested all of us. And some of us failed. I ain't gonna lie to you. When the dust settled and the classroom emptied out, I thought that was the end of it. Like, maybe we finally saw a grown woman stand her ground, and that'd be that. Maybe people would respect her after that. Maybe kids like Tyler would think twice, but I should have known better. In this world, it's never that simple. Especially when you're a black woman. Especially when you fight back. And especially when you fight better than the ones who started the fight in the first place. The next morning, Southwood didn't feel the same. You could feel the heat before you even walked through the front gates. Whispers in the halls. Teachers huddled in corners. Students checking their phones every 5 minutes in the office. That place was on fire. Phones ringing non-stop. Front desk staff whispering into receivers. Something had shifted, and not in a good way. It was like the walls themselves knew a storm was coming. And in the middle of all that noise, Olivia Lane walked in like she always did, steady, unshaken. But I saw it, just for a second, that flicker in her eyes, that same stillness she showed when Brandon lunged at her. She knew the game was changing. What happened next? It spread like wildfire. Someone had leaked a clip, just 10 seconds, a phone recording. All you could see was Tyler rushing her, Olivia stepping to the side. Then boom, him on the floor. But there was no context. No Brandon. No paper ball. No build-up. Just a black woman flipping a black teenage boy in front of a classroom. That was all folks needed to lose their minds. The narrative took off before she had a chance to breathe. Headlines that read, "Violent substitute slams minor in class." Blogs reposting the clip with music and slow motion like it was a UFC match. Parents started showing up angry, screaming in the lobby, demanding she be fired, some even calling her dangerous. The media didn't care about the full story. They never do. It was sexier to paint her as a threat, a fighter, a woman with a dark past who snapped in front of kids. And you know what hurt the most? The people who should have protected her, who should have known better, they folded. The principal called her into the office, told her it'd be best if she stepped aside for a while, said it'd be better for everyone if she just quietly resigned, took the blame, and let the school move on. Like she was just some problem to erase. Not the only one in that building who ever made those boys pause and think twice. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't pull the CCTV. He just pushed her toward the exit. But here's the part most folks don't know. There was a security camera in that room, mounted up high in the corner, half covered in dust, but it worked. And that camera caught everything. From Tyler's first insult to Brandon's shove to Olivia's calm response. It saw it all. But that footage? It didn't get released right away. Nah. The administration held onto it, said they were reviewing it while the damage spread. Meanwhile, Olivia? She was forced to sit at home while strangers dissected her life on the internet. And then came the leak. Someone found out about her MMA background, her old fight posters, clips from local tournaments where she stood in the ring, hands taped, sweat dripping down her brow. They posted it like it was proof of guilt. She's a trained killer. She planned this. She wanted it to happen. Just wild stuff. But that's how it goes, right? They don't care about the truth. Just the angle. What nobody said was that her license had been inactive for years. That she hadn't fought competitively since before she got certified to teach. That she was never sanctioned for anything violent. Not once. They didn't mention her volunteer work with at-risk youth or her role mentoring girls coming out of juvenile detention. None of that made it into the conversation. They painted her like a predator, when all she did was defend herself with control, with precision and more restraint than most could have managed. The school board held an emergency meeting. I remember standing outside that building in the cold, watching adults argue through glass windows while students, parents, and community members waited to find out what would happen to the one person in that school who actually saw us. I wanted to believe they'd do right by her. I really did. But I'd seen enough to know better. And then, something shifted. One of the janitors, an older guy who'd been there since before I was born, leaked the CCTV footage, posted the full video on a burner account, and let it go viral overnight. No edits, no music, just raw truth. And that video? It told a different story. It showed Tyler's buildup, Brandon's shove, Kyle's phone. It showed Miss Lane staying calm, never striking first, never raising a hand until she had to. It showed what really happened, and people finally started to see. The outrage turned to questions. The headlines softened. Some of the parents who screamed loudest fell silent, and the same blogs that called her violent started asking why she was put in that position to begin with. But damage, it don't heal easy. She was still out of the classroom, still under review, still being judged by folks who'd never walked a mile in her shoes. She didn't go online to defend herself, didn't show up at protests. She just stayed quiet, stayed steady, like she always did. And that quiet, it said more than words ever could. Because what she stood for wasn't about one fight or one moment, it was about all of us. The kids who grow up unseen, the teachers who break themselves trying to hold broken systems together, the women who carry battles in their bones and still choose to walk with grace. Olivia Lane didn't just flip a student, she flipped the script. But the system? It still had the last move. And whether she'd get justice or be sacrificed for convenience, that part was still hanging in the balance. And deep down, I think she knew it. The question was, were we gonna let her stand alone? Or were we finally ready to fight with her? Because that choice, that silence, that moment, that would decide everything that came next. You know, sometimes life don't break you with a bang. It don't come down in one loud crash. Nah, sometimes it breaks in silence, through little cuts, through the weight of eyes that refuse to see you, through lies that spread quicker than truth, and through moments where no matter how right you are, you still feel like the world stacked the whole deck just to make you fold. That's exactly what it felt like watching Olivia Lane sit on that courtroom bench. She wasn't wearing no fight gear. She wasn't flanked by lawyers in shiny suits or surrounded by cameras like you see in the movies. She sat alone, back straight, hands folded like she was in church. Her clothes were plain, respectful, her hair tied back neat. But her eyes carried everything. Every insult she swallowed, every headline that painted her wrong, every quiet moment when she wondered if the truth would even matter. And behind her, Tyler, Brandon, Kyle, them boys who once thought they ruled that classroom, now sitting on the other side of that courtroom like deer caught in the headlights of their own choices. The room was full but felt hollow. Reporters scribbling, teachers whispering, parents adjusting their ties like truth was something they could brace for. And me? I just watched, stomach tight, fingers dug into the edge of the wooden pew, praying for something real to come out of all this mess. Then the video dropped. Someone, nobody knows who to this day, released the full security footage online. It was raw, uncut, no flashy edits, no commentary, just silence and truth. From the moment Olivia walked into the final toss that flipped Tyler on his back, it was all there. It showed every sneer, every shove, every disrespect that led up to her response. It showed her waiting, patient, calm, until she had no choice but to act. And the world, it changed. Fast. News stations backpedaled. Some deleted the earlier posts. The hashtags flipped from Fire Miss Lane to Justice for Olivia. People started digging deeper, and what they found shocked a lot of folks who thought they already had her figured out. Turns out, Olivia Lane wasn't just a former MMA fighter. She was a trauma counselor, certified, worked with teenage girls and boys who'd been through the darkest corners of life. Some abused, some abandoned, some just lost in a world that never gave them a chance. She used MMA as therapy, not violence, not aggression, but healing, structure, control. She taught those kids discipline because she lived discipline. Her classroom wasn't just four walls. It was supposed to be a place where broken spirits could finally breathe. But none of that made the headlines at first. It took a lawsuit. Brandon's parents tried to take her to court, claimed physical harm, emotional distress, said she attacked their child. They didn't care about context. They cared about control, about making her look like the threat. But see, court don't work the same when the full truth sits in front of you like a mirror. When Tyler took the stand, I saw it. That moment where the bravado cracked. He sat there, this boy who once thought the world owed him attention. And he broke. Right there in front of the judge, the jury, and everybody. His voice low, shaky, full of guilt that don't come from pressure. It comes from realization. He said, "We picked her because we thought she was weak. That's why we did it." I'll never forget those words, because they weren't just about Olivia. They were about every teacher that gets tested, every woman who's underestimated, every soul who walks into a room full of fire and chooses not to burn it down, but to hold their ground with grace. And then Olivia spoke. She didn't need no mic. Her voice carried like it was lifted from the gut of every survivor who never got their day in court. She stood up slow, cleared her throat once, and laid out the truth. Not just about what happened, but about why it happened. She didn't raise her voice, didn't point fingers. She talked about respect, about boundaries, about how power gets twisted when it ain't held accountable. She said something that stayed with me every single day since. Discipline without dignity is violence, and dignity without consequence is silence. I chose both. I chose to stand with dignity and defend myself when silence would have broken me. The room was still. Not a cough, not a shuffle, just breath shared by strangers who finally understood the cost of judgment without knowing the story. That clip, her words, went viral the next day. Millions watched it, not for drama, not for outrage, but for truth. Real, unfiltered black woman truth, the kind you feel in your chest, like someone just reached in and reminded you what it means to stand even when the world begs you to bow. The lawsuit, dismissed. The school district issued a statement. Weak, late, but still, a start. Olivia Lane didn't go back to Southwood after that, and I can't blame her. Sometimes the place where you proved your worth ain't worthy of your return. But she didn't disappear either. She started a program, an after-school initiative for troubled teens, MMA for healing, counseling for survival, mentorship for kids like Tyler, who didn't need punishment. They needed someone who wouldn't flinch when they tested limits, someone who saw past the noise and into the pain. And Tyler, he showed up. First week, no cameras, no social media, just him and a gym mat. And every week after that, more kids came. Because what Olivia Lane taught us that day in that classroom wasn't how to fight. She taught us when to stand, and that sometimes the strongest people in the room are the ones who carry their pain in silence, but never let it define how they move. I remember the day she resigned, didn't make a scene, didn't send out no emails or fight for her job like some folks might have expected after everything went down. Olivia Lane just walked into that building one last time, handed over a letter in a plain envelope, and walked back out with her head high and her name clean. But behind that strength, behind that poise, I could feel the weight she was carrying, because it wasn't just about walking away from a school. It was about walking away from a battlefield that tried to make her the villain for surviving. And still, somehow, she kept showing up. Not at Southwood. That place lost her for good. But a couple weeks later, she was offered something else. A position at a juvenile detention center out in the county. Quiet facility. Mostly boys who'd fallen through every crack the system left open. No classrooms, no lockers. Just walls, guards, and kids that folks had already written off. Now, if you don't know what it means to walk into a room full of boys who've been told they're monsters, let me tell you, you gotta come with more than rules. You need presence, compassion, command, and a spirit that don't waver when pushed. Olivia? She walked in and they knew right away. She wasn't there to break them. She was there to see them. She didn't bring worksheets or PowerPoints. She brought pads, gloves, and patience. She started a small martial arts class 3 days a week, discipline-focused but heavy on self-control and emotional regulation. But it wasn't just about throwing punches. It was about understanding the why behind them. Most of those kids didn't even realize how angry they were until they had somewhere to put that rage, and Olivia gave them that space. It was quiet work, no cameras, no articles, no applause, just healing. Meanwhile, Tyler and Kyle, court mandated them into a youth behavior program after the case got dismissed. They tried to act like they didn't care, like it was just another hoop to jump through. But when they found out Olivia was part of the staff leading the program, something shifted. Tyler avoided her at first, wouldn't meet her eyes, wouldn't speak up in group sessions. But little by little, that wall he built started to crack. I could see it in how he watched her move. Not with fear, but with a kind of confusion. Like he was trying to figure out why the person he tried to humiliate wasn't holding a grudge. 3 months in, he finally picked up a pair of gloves. Didn't ask for help. Just stood by the mat until Olivia nodded, and he stepped in. No one clapped. No one said a word. But that was the moment the real work began. He was different after that. More still. More focused. He didn't stop being a teenager. Still had that mouth on him. Still slipped up now and then. But that bitterness, that aimless rage, it started to fade. He began journaling, asking questions, even started helping one of the younger boys who struggled with focus. Something inside him had been unlocked, not by punishment, but by presence, by grace. 1 year later, Olivia got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, just a single page, folded twice. It was from Tyler. It didn't start with "I'm sorry." It didn't list excuses or try to reframe the past. It just said, "You were the first adult who didn't run when I tested you. You stood your ground, but you didn't humiliate me. You didn't treat me like a threat. I never forgot that. I don't know what I'm gonna be yet, but I know I don't want to be the boy I was in that classroom ever again. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." She didn't read that letter to anyone. I only saw it once, years later, when she was packing up her office to move to a new city. She just held it in her hand for a while, real still, then folded it back up and placed it in a worn envelope like it was sacred. And it was, because sometimes the strongest teachers ain't the ones that get awards. They ain't the ones that climb ranks or publish textbooks. Sometimes the strongest teachers are the ones who show up where nobody wants to go. The ones who teach not just with words, but with presence, with stillness, with fight, not to win, but to save, to restore. Olivia Lane didn't come to that school to teach algebra. She came to save souls. And even when the system tried to erase her, she carved a deeper truth into the ones who mattered most. The kids everyone had counted out, the ones who only understood power, until someone showed them what strength really looked like. Now I can't tell you what became of every student she taught, but I can tell you this. She changed the direction of more lives than we'll ever be able to count. And not by fighting back, but by refusing to walk away from the battlefield just because it got messy. Because Olivia Lane, she didn't come to be liked, she came to be remembered. And she is. Before I let you go, I want you to sit with this. Let it press on you the way it pressed on all of us in that courtroom, in that classroom, in that city that never really knew her name until it was too late to say it with respect the first time. Would you have believed her if all you saw were the headlines? If the only story you heard was the one spliced together on a teenager's phone? A shaky clip, a freeze frame, a caption that said, "Teacher snaps in class." Would that have been enough for you to make up your mind? 'Cause that's what the world almost did. They almost let her be forgotten, erased, buried beneath opinions louder than facts. And I ain't here to tell you how to feel. I'm here to remind you that truth don't always come in the loudest voice. Sometimes it comes in stillness, in resilience, in scars that ain't shown, but felt. See, Olivia Lane didn't just teach kids, she taught us about what real strength looks like, about what it means to carry pain without dropping your purpose, about how even when they push you, break you, drag your name through the dirt, you still got the right to stand tall and not apologize for surviving. And now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Was she wrong to fight back? Or was this the only way someone like her was ever going to be heard? Drop your thoughts in the comments, be honest, be real. But remember, you're not just talking about a story. You're talking about someone's truth. And if you thought this story was intense, wait till you hear what happened in a quiet little school outside Atlanta, where a principal staged his own kidnapping to cover up a scandal that went deeper than anyone expected. Yeah, that one'll have you questioning everything. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. 'Cause the stories we tell here, they ain't just headlines, they're life. And life don't come with a script. We just trying to make sense of it, one truth at a time.